Good evening, everybody. I did my research project on John Hanson. The reason why I chose John Hanson was there's questions whether he is the first president of the United States or the first president under the Articles of Confederation. The reason why I thought that this was pretty significant was how John Hanson actually got involved into politics. He did local politics, local government type stuff, working as the sheriff in the county, and then working as a statesman for Maryland. But it wasn't until later, after the Stamp Act of 1765, that he really got involved in patriot politics. And he actually had to go to the Maryland Convention to actually persuade them into signing the Declaration of Independence so that they can break away from British rule. One of the reasons Maryland didn't really want to get too involved in that is because the issues that were going on up in New England or Massachusetts specifically were not having those same effects in Maryland. Maryland did have a lot of trade areas, having the Potomac River, the Patuxent River, the Chesapeake Bay, and also having easy access into the Atlantic Ocean. So it wasn't until about 1779 that John Hanson was actually a state delegate that he really started getting involved in. During this time, they had the Articles of Confederation that were in the process of being signed by the states. This is in the middle of also during the Revolutionary War and the fighting and stuff that's been going on. So during that time, John Hanson was working on getting his militias, the Maryland militias, going, working on getting arms and ammunition, working on getting supplies and stuff sent to the battlefronts, and just doing everything he could to support the war effort. One of the things that happened after the Articles of Confederation were actually signed was he was elected as the president under the Articles of Confederation, or because it was under the Second Continental Congress, some of them label it as Congress Assembled. Either way, he was deemed the first president, and he he held the office from 5 November 1781 to 4 November 1782. During that 1 year period, and it was from 1781 to 1789 before the U.S. Constitution was finalized, ratified, and signed into law, making George Washington the first president. Before that, we had the Articles of Confederation, and John Hanson was the first year-long elected official. He initially didn't, after a couple weeks, didn't want it because it was more or less a paper drill. To relate it into today's terms, he was pretty much the Speaker of the House. He still voted along with everybody else in Congress, not as the president, even though he did sign whatever documentations they had into law. Some of the things that he developed while he was the president was he created the Foreign Affairs Department. He also created the Thanksgiving Day holiday, being the fourth Thursday of November. He created the Treasury Department, and he also created the Secretary of War. All of these were contributing factors into everything that later became additional supports to the what would later be the Constitution. Some of the other things that John Hanson did was he created the first presidential seal. That is still used today. So the same seal that all 47 presidents have used are the same ones that the first 8 under the Articles of Confederation used, because John Hanson first used it in 1781. When they signed documents, a lot of the stuff that was done in 1781 were mostly because the war was winding down. The battles had ended. George Washington accepted Cornwallis's surrender. So a lot of this stuff was not really laws or institutionalized things that would become laws. They were still working on the Constitution. But a lot of the stuff that was done under John Hanson, which the next 8 individuals under the Articles of Confederation fell on and used, were the same tools that George Washington used. And after the U.S. Constitution was ratified and George Washington was president, Congress elected and approved those same tools that John Hanson institutionalized in the beginning, which kind of gives the idea that John Hanson actually, even though he didn't serve a full 4-year term, and he probably couldn't have due to bad health, and that he had began his term so late in his career, because he ended up passing away in 1783. So he really wouldn't have made the full 4-year term. However, he did make it through his term, and he started the country with foundations in the government that would go on to be built on creating the U.S. Constitution, which then in turn we ended up having the Bill of Rights, and we're continuing with our form of government, which all started with not just John Hanson. He was the formalized person, but I mean, we had all the founding fathers that were involved in that. He was just the leader of the pack at that time. And of course, everybody else was supporting those, and those founding fathers remained in those positions until later, where they were able to either pursue being a president or in other areas, like Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and Sam Adams and them. So, but John Hanson was probably the first. I wouldn't say probably. I would say John Hanson provided the foundations for George Washington to be successful. He was a great military leader. However, he was not really one for politics. And he fell in on something that was already established and set up for him to be successful. Thank you.